Hello and welcome everybody, I'm One Proud Bavarian, and Khans of the Steppes, the upcoming core expansion, I believe on the 26th or the 28th of April, is coming closer and closer. And starting today, I just want to talk about all the features that we know about so that you are informed and so that we know what is coming for us. Now this is one of the bigger DLCs, of course it is only the first one in this year, well the first, real DLC anyway, and it is all about the nomadic government, which you can already see right here. There are some more screenshots on the Steam page, we're going to take a look at this as well as we go. We're going to talk about the very first dev diary here, and I'm going to go through this bit by bit, discuss it a little bit. I'm of course very eager to hear your opinions as well, and then sooner rather than later we're going to be looking at the actual DLC coming out. It is not that long anymore. Today we're going to learn everything about the basics of nomadic governments and so on and so forth. In the next videos we're going to talk about the greatest Khan of Khans, we're going to talk about tributaries and so on, so make sure to subscribe and let's just jump straight in. Before we go into the actual dev diary, let's take a look at the Steam page right here. Yep, it's the 28th of April, and there are two screenshots that I really want to look at because they are just so good. We are getting an actual full throne room. Man, we have been neglected in Royal Code for a couple of years now, but it is slowly but surely starting out. Road to Power, of course, had a great throne room as well, the Byzantine one, and this one right here looks absolutely gorgeous as well. Huge fan of this actually now taking shape, getting some more and more throne rooms there, and I really like the decorations here. This is a beautiful thing. The other thing is, of course, what your nomadic capital looks like. So this is in the vein of the administrative kind of domiciles that you had in, the Roads to Power DLC as well as the landless domiciles. We're getting nomadic capitals right here that can, interestingly enough, not that this matters right now, you're going to learn about this a little bit more in just a second, they can have a different culture from you, which means your people and then the ruling class of those people don't necessarily need to be the same thing. I really like that. I think that is awesome. But of course, the more important part, maybe, the art, as always, looks absolutely gorgeous. CK3's artists are without a doubt nailing it, and those are really just the two things that I wanted to show off. We see a more complete version of the screenshot right here as well that we had in the dev diary. We see, one of these events, Peace of the Great Khan. There is, of course, a lot going on here, and this is roughly everything that we can get from the Steam page itself. And so with that, let's sit down, let's maybe get a coffee, and then let's sit down to talk about nomadic government. At the core of this update lies the new nomadic government. This new government type is heavily inspired by the rulers of the Eurasian steppe and puts a heavy emphasis on herd, might and land. I will tell you this right now, that this government very clearly, at least to me as it is listed here in the DLC content, will be locked, at least in this iteration, will be locked behind the DLC itself. This is now a trend that is very normal, that is very common, whereas previously changes were made that, were government-wise and so on, like the culture changes, like everything related to what happens inside of the changes to clan that came with the Iranian intermezzo. All of that stuff was done in the free patch. That is just no longer the case. The region system, the tributaries, the Become the Scourge of God, the nomadic government, all that stuff will now be locked behind the DLC. So if you don't have the DLC, then expect this to be tribal still. Anyway, let's talk about what this government does by starting to talk about herd. Your cattle and horses are represented by a new currency only available to nomads called herd. In the steppe, herd is incredibly valuable and plays a big role in how other nomads perceive you. It can be used for ransoming, dowry, bribes, and even stolen via a scheme or raiding. It controls who the cultural head is and serves as a gate for increasing dominance. We'll talk more about dominance later in the dev diary. Herd is obtained both through the land by exploiting its fertility and through your nomadic subjects via their contracts, since nomads don't have a stable income. We will talk more in depth about this in the land section below. One of the main changes when it comes to nomads is that they do not use levies. Instead, they transform a percentage of their herd into horde riders. Firstly, let's talk a little bit about herds as is, and this makes a lot of sense. You have a different resource. What was important in these societies compared to, for example, Western European societies or even Viking societies, and last but not least, of course, also clan societies, so basically Muslim societies, was of course significantly different, right? What was a valuable thing and how you would actually covet this was valued entirely differently. Now, the interesting thing here is that they do mention dowry. If you are imagining that this means we are getting like something like a dowry gameplay system, that is not the case, but it will impact, how likely people are to marry you. So this is more than likely just or mostly a modifier anyway. I do really like that this controls who is the cultural head. It describes very much not just the territorial control of anything, for example, like it does in normal gameplay. It rather makes it so, no, we actually have physical importance here because we have the biggest herd lot going on. I like this as a resource, I like this as a new currency, I think there's nothing wrong with this, at least, you know, at first glance right here. The other thing, and this is kind of eyewash, not in a negative sense, I don't think it is negative at all, but they are saying that the herd, a percentage of the herd, becomes horde riders, and that these are not technically levies, but men-at-arms. You're gonna see a screenshot here in a second. They are in the levy spot, and I think they just want to like reframe it, which makes a lot of sense, but practically speaking, they are the equivalent of levies within the nomadic government. And you're gonna see that they are slightly different because that is where you get your men-at-arms, but still, it's not really a complete deviation from what you know as your levies. It's just that these are sourced from a different thing, so from herd instead of your counties, and at the same time, they directly get transformed into men-at-arms if you were to recruit them. Horde riders are the most basic type of men-at-arms that nomads have access to. However, these riders can be then upgraded to better men-at-arms types, such as horse archers for a cost of gold. These numbers don't come from a vacuum, however. If you want to create 100 horse archers, then you will lose 100 horde riders, as they are converted into the new unit. Basic horde riders don't have an associated maintenance cost, but the other men-at-arms do in the form of monthly prestige, so very similar to tribal. We've opted for this change because warring was an essential part of the steppe life, and levies did not exist per se, as every able warrior would be called when the time was needed. This is why I'm saying I think mechanically this isn't actually that different from levies, like at all, outside of the entry and the exit point, right? However, I get it, it's a smart reframing. No, it's not the same. Levy service is completely different, and there were so many discussions that have been had inside of the CK3 community about even levies and the way they are represented, but it most certainly wouldn't apply to this particular government, so it makes sense that it just isn't present, and we treat, you know, the horde as if they basically were not levies, but men-at-arms. From a more mechanical standpoint, we wanted nomads to have fewer but stronger and more significant men-at-arms. The nomadic horde here is, I guess this is what is transferred, right? So 965% or 60% of 965 become the nomadic horde, and that is your horde riders plus the men-at-arms that you upgrade. The percentage depicted in the screenshot above represents what percentage of your herd can be converted into horde, as not all of them are mounts suitable for war. Sounds reasonable. So you want a big herd, and you want then to up that percentage so that your herd is actually much more efficient. This percentage can be affected by Yurt buildings, dynasty perks, character modifiers, and other factors. I like it. That sounds neat. You can see it right here as well. Again, when it comes to the upgrade, you could refill this men-at-arms, clearly indicating that this works much more similar to, for example, landless gameplay, where you have to manually refill it. But when you upgrade them, you basically grab them out of the horde riders and put them into something that is much better. You even see that it costs money and herd, and again that it will actually assume, you know, these horde riders are then becoming these upgraded men-at-arms. So far so good, I really like this. This means that whatever herd you're carrying around with yourself, well, that is also your potential for warfare, and maybe more importantly, it very much clearly shows a gameplay loop where you say you do not want to stagnate, you are not allowed to stagnate, because if you do, other people will grow their herd faster, which directly then of course means their warfare potential. This is really important to note because it could technically mean that you might even be able to be reduced to like one county, but you still have this massive herd lying around, right? Because they don't naturally take it away from you. It's a really interesting thing because I feel like this kind of very volatile up and down in the steppe is something that is difficult to depict. CK2 obviously tried with a lot of jank, and it did a decent job at the time, but what we're seeing here definitely has a lot more promise. To reflect the importance of your people, the names on a nomadic map are also different from our regular naming conventions. It is the Borjigin Mongols that move across the map, not the Duchy of Urgur. Locations are less important than peoples. Makes sense, right? The cultural head gets to take the cultural name, the Mongols, while the smaller rulers have a combination of their house name plus culture, the Borjigin Mongols for example. To better reflect the dynamics of the steppe, we have also changed the way that the cultural head is selected in nomadic governments. The ruler with the biggest herd becomes the head instead independently of their title, because you are of course still the richest, the most influential part of your culture. Makes sense, I like these changes here without a doubt. The names on the map, as well as this naming convention using culture, are still work in progress, and we are open to hear suggestions. I can't say that I know much about the peoples of the steppe, but honestly I like this. My biggest concern, we're gonna see this I think in the second video when we talk about tributaries quite a bit, is just legibility. It feels like it could become very difficult to really distinguish between all these different clans, these different nomad families right here, but fundamentally I really like the naming scheme. I already liked it when they changed it when you have a popular rebellion, that they name themselves, for example, the Occitans. I think that is a great change. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about here is might. In the steppe, might makes right. Titles are not as important as actual strength, and to reflect this, we have made a series of changes that only affect nomads. Nomadic rulers have access to dominance, a measurement of their perceived power. Low dominance implies a relatively insignificant chieftain, while the maximum dominance represents the rise of Genghis Khan. Dominance is a fixed scale, a mountain that nomads have to climb, with each level being a hard-achieved goal that each ruler must work towards. Only those who have a herd of a significant enough size are allowed to reach the next level. Dominance affects such things as vassal and domain limits, with their lower levels having a very reduced number of both, but with the higher levels offering impressive bonuses. If you can have multiple counties, that will then obviously also mean that your herd grows faster, right? So there is a snowballing effect here, but they very intelligently counteract it. I gotta tell you this, I was kind of skeptical when I read dominance here, because we already have legitimacy. We have so many resources, quite frankly, that indicate that I am a powerful ruler. Also, including, of course, just the amount of troops that you can raise. But there's a really, really good element to this that I wish kind of found its way into the philosophy of legitimacy and so on as well. But let's continue for just a second here. Dominance also governs the tiers that you're allowed to target during your migration. More on this in land. Access to special men-at-arms, title and vassal revocation, settlement outside of the steppe, flavorful decisions, and more. I fundamentally, even everything else aside, like the design process where essentially the equivalent of crown authority is being used here to give you much more practical and interesting capabilities. This, of course, ultimately feeds into the very practical capability of becoming the semi-leader of the steppes. I forgot the name, but we're going to see it in a bit as well. And then, of course, later activating the Khan of Khan decisions. Tying it to that stuff is cool. I think there's a clear line of progress. I really, really like it. But what I actually like about this is that this takes crown authority and says, we are making this into a general time of progression that ultimately will lead to you people becoming rivals. It's not that this is entirely applicable to feudal realms, by which I mean mostly it isn't. It could be for stuff like wanting to be an empire, for example, right? Imperial authority was very, very important. It was a religious element in Christian Europe. But what I'm saying is that they took something that was a very subjective measurement of your realm and then turned it into something that matters for the entire steppe. You will see this in a bit as well, like they say right here, right? You can become very, very important, you unlock more things, and eventually, yeah, you can actually go on and become Genghis Khan if you struggle through it. And all of this even impacts how other people will treat you. If you're very intimidating, if your might, if your dominance is very high, it gives you more options, but people will also treat you differently. If I'm taking a look at legitimacy, you have these elements to a certain degree. The same philosophy is there, but I would like it to be even more expanded. This right here, in my opinion, unequivocally has a reason to be here as an additional resource, as an additional balancing game, that kind of stuff, because it combines something and turns this into a common element that is shared across the steppe. It is a clear indicator, a very clear measurement of what your power level is. Because you could be incredibly powerful, but if you're not on this or that dominance, that means you don't get access to the most important men-at-arms, to the most important decisions, and with that aren't really a threat for everybody else. Once you get there though, yeah, you're a threat. Now I will say tying this of course not to any technology or something, but just to your literal lived power value, so you know how much herd you have. Big fan. I think all in all, really, really cool measurement, although it seems like we're just adding another resource. I don't think that is the case at all. Now with this one, I'm a bit more skeptical. I get why it's in here, and it makes perfect sense if you picture the nomads, right? But man, we really are kind of just amassing a lot of different measurements that measure something very similar, but not quite the same, so we have to get an additional one. This one is obedience. You will need loyal followers if you're going to take over the world, and it does not matter by what means you've ensured their loyalty. Obedience is a binary state. Either you are obedient or not. Every character that's a subject of court or courtier has obedience towards their overlord. Obedience works as a threshold. If a character is below the threshold, then they will be unruly, plotting against their overlord, or just having general acceptance malices to various interactions. However, if a character is above the threshold, then they will not form factions, start hostile schemes against their liege, and more importantly, will take their side during the Kurultai succession by voting for whichever heir was your preferred one. The Kurultai is formed by special members of your council, and having them on your side is extremely important for nomads. Obedience is calculated based on several parameters, like the relationship with the other character, friendship, their traits, and whether you have granted them a Kurultai or court position. If you look at how factions are formed. And I know that there's more going on there, but we have hooks, right, which ultimately is a loyalty thing, or it is a literal hook, so there's pressure on them that would make it so that they can't join. There are alliances that will block them. Then you have the whole opinion thing, and if you're a king, your opinion can be plus 100 and you still might join a faction because, well, you're a king, right? There are so many factors that go into this, including whether they feel intimidated, whether they, are at the very least related to you, all that kind of stuff, the opinion in general, of course. This is all of that, but quantified as a value that is specific to the idea of very, very aggressive, belligerent overlordship, in this case for the nomads, of course. So it kind of depicts something that is already in the game, but has never been crystallized this clearly into one proper value. I am just really hopeful that this won't be too tedious, because it will be running parallel, at least I assume so. If you take a look at this, we still have powerful vassals, we still of course follow with opinions, all that kind of stuff. I don't see the intimidated symbol here, but I have to assume that intimidation isn't gone, right? But my issue basically is I hope that they feed nicely into obedience so that they don't just run parallel and I go, hey, wait a minute, this guy is deeply intimidated and yet he is completely disobedient. What is happening there, right? If that is the case, then I am completely okay with this. So it really comes down to balancing, because yeah, it makes sense. You are looking for a different value than just will I join a faction or not? Because as you can see here, this impacts a whole lot more things, like not plotting against you at all, like voting for you in the Kurultai, which again, I really want to stress, voting for you and voting for lord changes, for example, is something that happens in the game already via your powerful vassals having a positive opinion of you, which is really similar to obedience, but not quite the same. I don't know. I feel like we have a measure that may have been better implemented if the other measures had been reformed, but ultimately, if this measure works nice in tandem with the already existing measures, then I'm in favor of it. That is just the big question that I have there. The other thing, and that is really important for me to highlight here in my mind, is it sounds to me, and we will be investigating this, of course, in the Khan of Khans dev diary when we get to it, but it sounds to me like the downfall of the Mongol Empire, assuming that you don't play in these steps, will now happen organically. When one of the leaders dies and the Kurultai is not in agreement and an event happens where, I don't know, the entire thing falls apart during the Kurultai, only then does it happen, rather than the game going, oh, so Genghis Khan was here, 3 more generations, and boom, everything falls apart into the Golden Horde, Ilkhanate, and so on. If they made it mechanically interesting, I would really like this. It sounds like it to me, but I don't want to be too sure here. This is Chieftain Yamuka of the Jadaran Mongols. He is a Bagatu of ours, so he is a knight, he's a Kurultai member, and indeed he is obedient. Let's hope that this is, again, well measured, because I think that is roughly where this is either gonna shine or really fall apart. Again, because it just runs parallel to so many other mechanics there already. Now, next, land. Nomads grow their herd by extracting fertility from the land. Thus, migrating becomes an important part of their loop in the early stages of the game, when their realms are not big enough to accommodate the horde. County fertility is calculated primarily based on the terrain type. Nomads deplete fertility of the counties they hold until it stabilizes at a fixed number, where the herd can be maintained. This number is mostly affected by the domain size, but stewardship, dynasty perks, yurt buildings, and other character modifiers can affect it. So this one right here is migration. Now what we have right here interface-wise is very early. One of the later dev diaries actually has better information there. I think that's okay. We are just trying to understand the basics of this government, and we're going to go into the details of migration, fertility, and so on, with the actual interface then also being present in the later dev diary. I think it is the second or the third video that I'm going to make about this. Let's talk about migration. When the domain fertility is depleted, it's time to migrate. Migration targets de jure titles, and the available title tiers you can target depend on your level of dominance. A nomadic ruler of dominance level 2 can only target counties and duchies, where someone with level 3 can target kingdoms as well. This means that smaller rulers should migrate frequently, either find abandoned lands occupied by herders, or subjugate themselves before bigger rulers. Bigger rulers in the steppe should, on the other hand, adopt a more sedentary way of life, and demand obedience and tribute from rulers in their sphere. We're seeing right here the migration fertility map. So this map is basically indicating to where we might want to migrate, and you can do a county and duchy if you have dominance level 2, if you have dominance level 3 and above, you can do a kingdom. I really like this process. What you're looking at is we have a very clear timeline, right? You try to climb that mountain. Other people try to climb that mountain as well, which means you're in a bit of a race. Now you can optimize this, you can just not be too fast and then, smash other rulers before they are able to ascend to become Genghis Khan, that kind of stuff. But the idea being, very, very early on, your gameplay loop actually looks different from later on. One of the things that I've very much bemoaned about the Landless Adventurer gameplay loop is that it doesn't differ all that much, and that you're in and out very, very quickly because there's not that much to do other than these same contracts, the same mercenary work, and so on. Now, there is a lot of roleplay potential there, don't get me wrong, but fundamentally it is not really a gameplay loop that gives much more than exactly this. In this one, we can very clearly see, you're small, your fertility will run out, you will want to migrate, you will then gather more and more herd, you will become stronger, and at some point, you will hit dominance level 3, and then maybe 4, at whatever point that might be, and all of a sudden you say, you know what, no, I can actually, my herd is so big, I can dominate everybody around me, and they will just pay me herd, and by paying me herd, well, I don't need to migrate anymore. Even then, of course, you still can, and you can do it on a kingdom level, but fundamentally, I like the dynamic here. I do wonder how often and how aggressively the AI migrates into, for example, player territory, because that can be risky. There are, of course, ways out of this, which is awesome that they, this is now the strength. If you do own roads to power, you can become landless if you get pushed out and then settle anywhere else in these steppes, or maybe just become landless for a bit, right? So that is really neat. Obviously, since the game over is gone, once you lose your land, I think we're looking at a really, really cool design there. Anyway, the migration screen allows you to negotiate with the local rulers, so basically you don't have to do it by force. Sometimes you might want to do it, just because you can. Send gold to increase acceptance and send herd to increase acceptance as well. If they're willing to give it up, then, you can just get in there and you don't need to go to war. If 2 or more independent rulers occupy the same de jure territory, then the ruler with the highest herd leads the negotiations with you. You can use gold, herd, or a hook to bribe them, and their acceptance depends on their relationship with you, your dominance level relative to theirs, your prestige, prowess, herd size, their traits, and other minor factors. A lot of factors, like it. If they accept, you will start a travel plan that will take you and your herd to the desired location. It's in the details, that? They didn't need to make this something where you actually need to travel to it, but they did. I like it. I really do. If the location had already been suggested by perhaps a courtier, you may get some extra bonuses for following the desires of your people. I wonder what that looks like, where there's like a random event if your fertility is very low. I would like it if my council, for example, went, you know what, we really want to be in the central step going forward. If there was an element to this, that would actually kind of remind me of the general quest that you get like an Imperator Rome in Stellaris, even in EU4, quite frankly. I like the idea of that. Let's see how frequent that is. If it's just an event, then obviously it's not going to be that impactful. However, many nomads may refuse to give up their lands, especially if they have a high level of dominance and find themselves pretty comfortable where they are. In those cases, one must resort to war. Makes perfect sense, right? You have to go to war, you push them out, and then we go from there. Migration wars allow the attacker to take the lands by means of force. The targeted ruler will be either displaced to their other lands if they hold any titles outside of the de jure, or be made landless, similar to administrative noble families or adventurers. While landless, nomads keep their yurts and upgrades but cannot grow their herd due to the lack of stable access to fertility. They roam the steppe in search of a new place to set up their tents. They already said that if you find a herd, and we're going to talk about herders in just a second, you can just settle there if you are an unlanded nomad. I like this. I think that's really cool. If you have a big herd, obviously you can probably just convert it anyway. They already stated that when you meet a herder as an unlanded nomad, so we're going to talk about herders in just a second, what you're looking at is that you can just settle there. So it should be relatively easy to find a different spot. It's just that you are at a huge disadvantage. Anyway, this one here really tops this off. I love it. No matter how you choose to migrate, your obedient vassals will follow you, while non-obedient ones will keep their titles and lands and stay where they were. The lands that you leave behind will be occupied by someone else entirely. If I'm reading this correctly, if I migrate and I have obedient vassals, they will also give up all their land and instead be assigned duchies. Imagine it like Hungary. We start in modern-day Ukraine, right? And then we do our migration to Hungary proper. And all those folks that were coming with me, well, they are looking at a situation where they now own land somewhere else that obviously also have fertility attached to it. So hopefully it's good land for them. But fundamentally, they are saying, I am part of the bigger kind of a contract, right? Of the bigger compact that is your rule. Your governance is a part of my lifestyle, so I am following you. I really, really like this. This is why I'm kind of okay with obedience. Again, the balancing with the parallel systems is very important to me, but fundamentally what we are looking at here is a really neat system to make it so that you can have a core system of vassals that all are trustworthy, they're all indeed committed to the cause, and they will migrate with you. I do wonder in this regard, when I bring my vassals, do I push more of the already locally existing folks out? If I don't bring my vassals, do I just take all of their territory and I have to hand it out manually, or do I keep them? So if you bring a lot of obedient vassals, it might be very beneficial because they push out people that don't like you and would be very unruly afterwards. I like this, cool stuff. I think the design here is really, really on point. And again, you have a big difference between your initial gameplay and then the later stages of nomadism before you settle or before you become the Great Khan. Now let's talk about herders, who are essentially non-map entities. Let's take a look at them. Nomads are not the only rulers that inhabit the steppe. A new unplayable government type called herder populates the map with shepherds that wander small counties. Herders replenish fertility over time and are extremely easy to displace given their lack of armies. They are the ones occupying those counties left behind by migrations. Having a herder as a subject is still possible, however, and they will pay a small fixed rate of herd based on their county's fertility, so you can have them as a subject. One may also choose to voluntarily abandon one of their counties to a local herder in the hopes that they will replenish fertility quick enough for them to seize it back. The steppe is not merciful, however, and another nomad ruler may be faster than you. Effectively, these are empty territories. They exist to say there's no big herd grazing here right now, which means this fertility of this county will recover. I've been looking at this and I've been thinking about this. I feel like this kind of undermines migration. You can still, or you should still migrate, I think, because it's way more fun. But what I'm saying is, let's imagine you have, I don't know, you can have 3 counties. And in total, you have 6 counties in your realm. You just conquered it or something, you know, stuff like this. You give 3 counties to herders, make them your subjects because they do not have an army. I wonder whether I can do this instantly or whether I like get a truce or something with them. Because you can voluntarily abandon it, right? So you voluntarily abandon 3 counties, wear down the fertility in the other 3 that you have, then they don't have an army, take away the 3 counties that you abandoned and made into subjects, and then you abandon the 3 that you had until now, which means you never actually have to migrate. You just pivot between one residence and the other residence. If that is feasible, obviously migrating, that's a lot of effort for the same effect. But I will say ultimately, of course, this just doesn't sound that fun. I only bring this up because effectively, herders aren't people, okay? Herders are very clearly just something that happens because we cannot have counties that don't have anybody possessing them, making it so that you get these kind of characters like Shepherd Jundus here of the Karakul that just exist, but if you look at them, they go, yes, I will give you all my land. Thank you. I appreciate it, right? That's where I'm coming from. I think there's a very clear pathway here to making it very easy for you to always be at max fertility, even without ever clashing really with anybody else, because you don't need to do that, right? You are in a position where you always have max fertility thanks to the herder rotation. And we're going to see whether it works this way. I'm definitely going to try it once we get access. It sounds interesting. Either way, I like migration a lot. The herder stuff, it's just kind of a stopgap measure, right? Because the engine can't do it differently. It is what it is. Let's talk about something that I absolutely love and that makes me, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, it makes me really excited for All Under Heaven. They have already talked about that they are working on the topic of struggles. Struggles are seeing a completely new iteration. This is Struggles 2.0. Is it called Situations or Situations something that is in my mind because of EU5? Not entirely sure, but this is what the Great Steppe is. Life in the steppe is not easy, and being at the mercy of the weather and pasture quality is something that nomads have had to adjust to since time immemorial. Up to this day, in fact. To reflect this, we have created a seasonal system that governs the general climate of the steppe. The Great Steppe is divided into 3 subregions, Western, Central and Eastern, each of them with their own season. So they all get a season assigned, it impacts you, it's much like struggle phases, but it's the weather, so you kind of just look at it and go, okay, I have to deal with this. This changes my circumstances and it changes them in a really cool way. What else do we see here? We see, of course, the white suit, the abandoned grazing, the severe drought. We are currently in the eastern steppe, which means we have white suit. We might want to go to the abandoned grazing here in the central steppe because that seems amazing to actually grow a herd as quickly as possible. Again, there are other factors. We're going to talk about that in just a second. We also get a seasonal prediction, which means, you know what, if I'm already somewhere, I might just stay because my stargazer says, 56% chance of abundant grazing. In which case I'm like, that's amazing. I really like this. You combine the folk knowledge, so the religious element, together with the, hey, I actually know this territory because I've been around. I have some understanding of what indicates where seasons are going. Obviously, seasons don't last for literal years, but it's gameplay abbreviations. The same way that campaigns technically were only in the summer if your troops, disbanded every winter. It would really suck. Anyway, we're looking at a new iteration of struggles. It's so obvious here, and it feels, or it looks really good at the very least. Seasons affect the fertility of the subregion, as a white zoot creates a thick layer of snow that prevents the animals from grazing, while a more moderate and warm weather offers the perfect climate for pasturing. That's not the only effect they have though, as different seasons also change the general mood within nomads. If a ruler extorts their vassals for herd during an abundant grazing season, then they will receive more than usual, and a severe drought will promote characters to migrate even more than usual. I love this. We have essentially the Iberian struggle, we have the Iranian intermezzo, and they were saying, okay, we want to change the behavior based on logical elements. Now, in both of those struggles, what the behavior of people was like was largely driven by societal changes. Here it's the other way around. The weather dominates your societal changes. If you are already in a tough spot as a community, as a society, extorting others will probably be worse. People will be less, willing to be obedient. People are saying, hey, I have to look out for number one, and number one is me and not my liege, right? What we have right here is so cool. I want this so badly. I want to test this for stuff in China, for, the legitimacy of the dynasty, for everything going on in, for example, the God Kings of Indonesia. I want to see this, of course, in Japan as well. This new system application that is clearly seeing its very first actual implementation here sounds awesome. I really like it. It seems more flexible. Great stuff. I think to mark the actual location like this is a really cool approach. And again, I talked about this in a bit ago. For many of the features for CK3, I got the feeling that, it is inspired by history, but it doesn't lean too much into this. This one, I got the feeling they were like, okay, how do we explain this? How do we implement this actual particular thing? And how do we do it as truthfully as possible? There's, of course, a big distinction between for example, and there were some historians that wrote a great bit about this, actually, like a great piece, about the summer and the winter residence of the nomads, but I think this is the best or a good approximation for this anyway, the same way that every game has to kind of make a compromise between mechanics and historical authenticity. I love this. This is really, really cool. The implementation here makes me very, very giddy to kind of check out what is going on in All Under Heaven. The two special and rare seasons of Hafsas and Zood and the Blessing of the Blue Sky explore these effects even further, with the blessing amply increasing the fertility of the subregion and the terrible Hafsas and Zood allowing rulers to take a desperate stance, making all of their subjects obedient and getting an invasion CB on settled people. This is when you get out basically interesting. One of the academic reasons given for the Mongolian invasion is, after all, the lack of pasture in the steppe at that point in time. I believe this is kind of like the other way around. Actually, there was a piece written specifically about this, again, by a historian. Really cool stuff. I'm going to see whether I can't link it in the description. But the idea here clearly follows, right, proper indications of what would drive the player to behave in a historical fashion, because it is the best thing to do for them. If those two things align, you get the best results, I think, mechanically and historicity-wise. Your Stargazer can also help predict the next season depending on their aptitude. More on this in upcoming dev diaries. Here's the guy. This is the second in the steppe, basically the Gurkhan. Only one character in the entire steppe can go on to the highest level of dominance and become the greatest of Khans, but we will provide you with tools to stop them. The Gurkhan is whoever has the largest herd within the Great Steppe. They are on their way to reach the highest dominance and are a threat to all. Confederations may form to target them, more on this in the next video, while hostile scheming and wars may target them more frequently, and the Gurkhan will have to prove that they deserve their seat. Like I said, you start out tiny, you keep migrating, you build your herd. At some point you say, I'm going to be settled now, I'm going to start doing the herder swap thing that I talked about earlier, and I'm going to start subduing everybody, giving myself even more herd, making sure nobody can overcome me. Boom, I become the Gurkhan, everybody becomes very threatened, and either I make it to become the Khan of Khans, or I kind of get toppled over right here. This is the build-up, and again, I like that they have this very bespoke mechanism in the nomad government mechanics. Now let's talk about our Yurt. Nomads have no buildings, whatever they build is carried with them when they migrate. Makes perfect sense. Yurt settlements have a main Yurt that can be upgraded internally, so when you click it you get some upgrade boosts there, and several other specialized buildings that give upgrades to pasture management, warfare, diplomacy, raiding, and more. Very classic stuff. I feel like you probably, when you start out, want to build all this stuff up first, because this is just how you snowball, right? You start at that point. I'm going to say everything, I'm going to say what everybody is expecting. The art is beautiful. I love the art. This is absolutely amazing. I always love looking at my domiciles. At this point, I'm like, I like the way, you know, tournaments look like, for example, but I would love it if those tournaments looked like this as well. This is just really, really gorgeous. Now, let's talk about tributaries, and again, we're going to talk about tributaries even more going forward. And I believe we have this here. Actually, we're getting a new base tributary type as well that is available for non-nomads. I think that is awesome. I really endorse the idea of making tributaries way more common, because the full integration of somebody into a realm is yeah, it's something that is way too easy in CK3, and I always welcome it when you can just say, hey, you know what, no, I just want you to pay me tribute, you know, lip service and some money, and we're golden. Now, we are already going to learn a little bit of stuff about the tributaries right here, so let's take a look. Tributaries are a new and looser type of subject introduced with this expansion. Nomadic tributaries specifically have some unique qualities to them. Again, I will say, since it is listed in the Steam overview right here, tributary system, it seems to me like you're not going to have tributaries. So the steppe region tributaries, they're all DLC. Your steppe won't change that much in practical terms, at least I would guess, if you are not playing with the DLC. That is at least how I can interpret it. The tributary contract governs the levels of obligations or tribute that they may pay to their suzerain. While the tribute is being sent, all is well, and a truce is held between the two of them. The tributary relationship is even inherited across generations. That is huge. I hope that this is moddable, because something that can break when you die, I think that is completely feasible for other tributary institutions. If you do it here for the nomads, it probably becomes incredibly tiresome. Imagine you are a nomad and you make a tributary out of everybody that is to your west. Poland, Hungary, Ruthenia, the Baltics, and so on. And then they just keep individually being replaced by factions or dying, and you just have to keep marching on there to maintain them. Kind of boring, because you will always win, but yeah. Luckily, that doesn't seem to be the case, because again, it is inherited across generations. Tributaries may become unruly over time, and if the suzerain doesn't look that threatening to them, then they may eventually opt to stop paying tribute. To bring them back into the fold, a former suzerain can bring them back under tribute by force, pacifying them and extracting both resources and prestige to a greater extent. So I guess if they rebel, it changes your tributary contract, right? And that might make it so that your obligations are much bigger, so them rebelling is technically kind of good. Nomadic tributaries offer a payment in herd, while settled tributaries give gold to the nomadic suzerains. We can see the very clear gameplay direction right here. Assuming that I'm upgrading my Yurt, right, with gold, and not with herd, because gold is the thing that makes sense here. I don't think it's written here, but assuming I upgraded with gold, my gameplay loop is probably going to be, you go to the western steppe, you make a bunch of people into tributaries, you upgrade all your buildings, and then you get out of there, go to the eastern steppe, and all of a sudden just get entirely nomadic tributaries, making sure that your herd grows at a massive rate. Tributaries can be obtained through a character interaction to demand tribute, or through a casus belli. A ruler may also voluntarily offer themselves as tribute to a nomadic ruler to ensure that their lands are spared from destruction. The one thing that I'm missing here, and I believe it is confirmed that that is not coming, the one thing that I'm missing here is something that EU5 does, of course, where tributaries can essentially bind themselves together and do something about their relationship. We know we have confederations, we're going to learn about this going forward. However, it's not really quite the same, right? Tributaries are not vassals, which means they are not part of factions, or at least I would assume so. Maybe they can be part, actually, maybe they can be part of factions. I would like that, right? If I'm the HRE and I turn France into a tributary, I would like if they could join factions against me, because, yeah, they might want to do this. But basically, the way I see this is that if tributaries could completely bind together, we could see something like the Rus, for example, right? That are slowly but surely trying to rise up against the Golden Horde, all that kind of stuff. If they cannot do it, then we may end up seeing individual revolts of tributaries, which are always doomed to fail, but will just trigger because they can't evaluate, hey, there are other people, if they rebel at the same time, we might win. Yeah, I wish that they could bind together, because that always makes it a lot more interesting and a lot more threatening. Anyway, let's talk about confederations for just a second. With the rise of all these powerful and dangerous khans in the steppe, lower-tier nomadic rulers may decide to go band together against a bigger enemy through forming a confederation. For those in a confederation, an assault on one member is an affront against all members, so everyone in the confederation joins defensive wars being fought by fellow members. This potent defensive power is balanced against checks on expansion. As long as they belong to their confederation, members cannot increase their dominance or create new titles. which means you know, probably want to join this, or like you are going to be in this when you're like level 1 or 2. And then when you have a decently sized herd that will allow you to go up to 3, you want to drop out and, you know, go from there. Next up, raid intents. Raiding is one of the main ways nomads have to get access to gold. Given the importance that raiding had in their society, we have decided to expand this feature by adding raid intents. A raid intent allows to set a desired outcome of the raiding. You may want to raid to capture interesting characters, steal your neighbor's cattle, or simply burn their property to the ground. Some of the raid intents will also be available for tribal characters, while others need specific nomad unlocks. Raid for gold, raid to raise servitors, captives, innovations, and herd. I think I like this, but the names and the effects are obviously not really disclosed here. Again, these names are placeholders. I like the idea of saying I really need this or that, because otherwise I might have to go for a different route. But if I just can raid, why wouldn't I do it? Nothing wrong with this one. Now lastly, of course, we have Nomadic Flavour. You will expect to see a Kurultai, Blood Brotherhood's Paisas, and Kublai Khan's famous Pleasure Dome. More on this to come. I like this. Like I said, I am a huge fan of the very clear gameplay loop that they are showcasing here. I think the deviation there, the differences and the difficulties that come with your early stage and your late stage, right, as you start conquering the steppe compared to just barely migrating to make some money off of maybe, you know, some folks to the west. I like it. I also enjoy that, of course, this now means you had kind of a lot more freedom to design the system, because fundamentally this is really nice. The landless capability makes it so that you can keep being a nomad even if you lose all your lands, which is kind of, I mean, you're a nomad, right? I really enjoy what they've done with the struggles, the changes that they've made there, and I'm looking forward to what they're doing for it with All Under Heaven. Now, with all that being said, I'm very positive about this one. I really do hope that they get balancing and bugs right here, because the entire obedience thing, it kind of runs parallel to a bunch of systems we already have that I have to assume feed into obedience. Let's just hope that that doesn't feel too chaotic, because if I have to both focus on my legitimacy and then the opinions and the intimidation of everybody, and then additionally check in whether they are obedient, there's just a lot of busy work going on for not that much additional value. Let's take a look at some of the answers they've given. There are some interesting ones. This post right here was my favorite for sure. Can nomads lose dominance, or does it only ever go up? They can lose it. We have added an humiliation CB that can be used to force another nomad of a higher dominance to go down one level, pay you some herd and prestige, and lose obedience from some vassals. Basically the dissolution of somebody else's realm, right? By destroying the obedience as well. I would really like it as well if it was relatively common to lose buildings in your actual domicile, just because the domicile, very much like it is in Landless Adventurers and very much like it is in the Byzantine gameplay loop, you're looking at a domicile that will only get better. It almost never gets worse. I know technically it can get worse in the Byzantines in particular, but it's so rare it barely plays a role. It's only up there. Hearing that, of course, dominance is not always up there. Good stuff. Will your herd decrease significantly if you stay in one space and deplete fertility? Herd stagnates if you stay in low fertility areas. You won't grow, but you won't lose it either. That's what I'm saying, right? You can be in the west, very low fertility, doesn't matter. You get a lot of gold, upgrade your yurts, then you go into the east, make a lot of nomadic people your vassals, and boom, all of a sudden you can become a major threat. Will nomad hordes disappear? Are new nomad hordes created over time? Some nomads will be displaced by migration and become landless. If they do not find a place to graze, they may disappear. It's such a wasted opportunity, if you ask me. And we had it in CK2. We had nomad adventurers, even to like a very ridiculous degree, right? Where the Chinese prince could come along and kind of hop on over, be one of those mid-game enemies. But it was cool, it was neat. I liked seeing nomad adventures very similar to CK3, Varangian adventures, sorry, not Varangian, the Norseman adventures, that kind of stuff. I wish that we would see this come back here, especially if they're displaced. Why wouldn't they try a desperate push westwards? I hope at the very least that if you have the really bad season that we mentioned earlier, that you kind of get that effect as a landed ruler. Seeing some impact of nomads in the settled area is really important to me. We're going to see whether it happens at all. But basically what we're looking at, right, is the nomads had a massive impact in subjugating people and getting tributaries, not just the Mongols, but many other folks as well. The Hungarians are infamous for this. I cannot stop talking about the Magyars and their raids towards the very far ends of Europe. I really hope that that plays a role. It's really cool. I would like to see some nomad adventures. I would like Landless to kind of slot in there. you know, make it more interesting, but we'll see how that goes. Is the steppe area fixed? Can settled rulers lose land to nomads? There will be decisions to expand the steppe in some areas like Hungary. Other than that, nomads can hold castle holdings. They won't be able to use them for much other than getting some taxes, but they can have them. Do the Magyars in 867 get nomad government? If so, are there any changes to the current Hungarian migration feature? Yes, they are nomadic, but no specific content was added as of now. I really wish we had some bespoke content there, because again, the Hungarians were so pivotal in the formation of Western Europe as we recognize it then in 1066, and that is because they did the nomad stuff. We'll see. I hope that they're fun to play. I hope that you don't just go in and immediately become feudal or something, right? I don't know how it works. I assume that they get DLC appropriate CB, or maybe they get the standard Hungarian migration CB, whether they still use this. Who knows? All I'm saying is, I love Hungarians, and I really, really hope that the strengths of the system that we see here are also applied then, so that I can, for example, take a raider army and move it all the way into Iberia and then just walk back without eating a lot of attrition. I don't think there was too much else here that we want to talk about. I just want to mention all of these things. They are in the next dev diary that we're going to be talking about in the next video. And this one shows a new base tributary type has been made available for non-nomads, right? Concerns about the nomadic economy have been addressed by adding a monthly income for nomads based on their herd size. Right, okay, I get it. A game rule has been added to include nomadic governments in the Sahel, Arabia, the Horn of Africa, Sami and Karelia regions. I'm never going to play with this, I think, because these type of game rules, they're neat. Yeah, sure. You know, being administrative realm is applicable to other areas than just the Byzantines, historically speaking, but that system is specifically built for the Byzantines, so it's gonna be really sucky. I don't think I'm ever gonna play with this, but it's cool that it's there, I guess. Tweak the borders of the steppe and characters who should be nomadic in all bookmarks. We've added a culture and faith specific to your nomadic capital, different than your own, so now you can have different culture and faith than your own. Awesome stuff. Reminds you of the Khazars, maybe. Adventurers can now become nomads if they move into a herder holding. This is awesome. Slots directly into roads to power. We've expanded what we originally scoped for raising. Don't know what that means. We've extended and altered the effects of some seasons. We have made it possible to grow your herd if you hold lands outside of the steppe, giving those counties fertility if held by a nomad. Cool. So that means I can go somewhere else. Maybe like in CK2 I can raise everything there. Not sure whether that is a thing that you can do. And then I can just live there. Without steppe effects, I guess, like without the weather changes, but I could just be there. I wonder how dominance would actually work then. Let's say I'm like in England. I turned England into a raised territory. Anyway, I really like this. There's cool stuff here. We're going to talk about tributaries in the next video, including tributaries and confederations. They are cooking. And by the way, you might be recognizing this name. Lacek used to work on Victoria 3, now on CK3. Welcome to the party, pal. Let's hope that the feature absolutely kills. Folks, I will leave it right here. Let me know what you think about the topics that we have talked about today. Tomorrow we will be talking again about tributaries and confederations. I'll leave you right here, and I will see you later, alligator.